we go to our first and exciting fireside chat of the day. We have a host who has supported us for many years at Techsylvania. So I want to welcome on stage Steffi Czerny, the founder of DLD, one of the best conferences in the world, and she's been a strong supporter of Vlad and Techsylvania.
I have the big pleasure to introduce you now to Constantijn. Constantijn, come. Prince Constantijn van Oranje leads the Techleap, Netherlands, the accelerator for the tech ecosystems in the Netherlands. A special envoy, his mission is to turn the Netherlands into a unicorn nation. Your mission should be to turn Romania in a unicorn nation. Don't you think so? Answer.
Silence.
Yes, silence. Yes. It's important. So come with me and learn about the fabulous tech ecosystem of the Netherlands. What is it all about, dear Constantijn?
That's a very open question.
Yes.
So what is it all about? So it's all about entrepreneurs. That's what it starts with. It's about entrepreneurs. It's about being ambitious. It's about getting the most ambitious entrepreneurs what they need. So that's capital, talent, and market entry, and a bit of technology. But that's basically it. And
entrepreneur is a wide field. How do you teach entrepreneurs? How do you find them? How do you give them a chance to an opportunity?
So in the Netherlands, we are fortunate that we are quite a country that has entrepreneurship in their culture, and that we like innovation. So the Netherlands is very anti-authoritarian, so everybody will continually ask, why should I do this? Why is this being done? And that kind of is always a good basis for innovation, because you want to build something new, something better. Our challenge has been that the entrepreneurs they like the independence. They don't typically scale their companies. So it's not just about starting companies, it's not just having companies, but it's also having companies that have a growth ambition. And as the Netherlands is a relatively small market, well, it's comparable to Romania, we have about 18 million people, you have to immediately think international. So it is really, the challenge is how to get, once you've got established basically a serious community of entrepreneurs, how to get them to build companies that really scale internationally, and how do they get the support networks, how do you ensure that there's a community of entrepreneurs that help each other, and how do you ensure that that attracts capital?
I'm a big fan of stories and of role models. Can you give us some examples for big successes in Netherlands?
Yeah. It's so basically all of our successes have been independent of any kind of policy. So independent of any kind of organization like mine until now. So in the 90s, we had first TomTom, and we had Booking.com, which is still one of Europe's biggest tech companies. Obviously, at the time, they didn't have any money. They had to go to the market. There was no venture capital available, so they had to sell the company for 100 million, and they're now about 90 billion company, but they're owned by an American group. So fast forward another 10 years, we have Adyen, a fintech company born out of the Netherlands. A number of entrepreneurs that have done it before. They did it. They built a payments company, and they IPO'd last I think a few years ago. At about the first trading day was 12 billion, and they're now a 50 billion company. They used to be against the 80 billion. So those are really successful models, but they haven't. They built their own road, right? Adyen has no Dutch investor. They have built an international team from the start. Their whole client base is global. Large operation in San Francisco. So they did it because they were exceptional entrepreneurs. Same with Just Eat Takeaway, pizza delivery company that did a different route. They acquired companies in Germany and in other places, and now European leader in the space. I mean, you probably know them from the Champions League because they were the main sponsor, and they have and then went to the US and also took over Grubhub. So really a very, very I think experienced entrepreneur, but who started from his university dorm and did all that, again, mostly with non-Dutch capital. And what we're trying to do is that those entrepreneurs will bring their experience back to the next generation of entrepreneurs, so that we actually can build much more in the Netherlands, that we're attracting much more capital, that a Dutch venture capital system starts to mature, that we get larger investors like our pension funds to invest, and then you slowly start building something that is more self-sustainable and will generate many more entrepreneurs and hopefully also more successful companies.
Very interesting, Constantijn. I'm an old veteran. I'm doing digital things.
You're a young veteran.
No. I'm probably the oldest person here in the room, but I'm very, very curious. And I have the feeling that right now we're in the midst, or in the beginning, not in the midst, we're in the beginning of a fundamental shift in digital opportunities. To my regard, digitalization is almost over. It's like electricity. We shouldn't talk at these conferences anymore about digitalization. We should talk about frontier technologies. We should talk about quantum physics. We should talk about, of course, deep technologies, about biotech, about personalization, of course, of how is generative AI bringing all this forward. Can you give us some examples how the tech ecosystem of the Netherlands react on this new era and this new beginning? Are there examples? The examples you mentioned have been old in the
exactly. No, I think a very good question. I think the situation in Europe and also in the Netherlands has shifted because of the war in Ukraine, because of COVID. We've seen that our supply chains are very vulnerable. Seen that technology is become much more critical for economic survival, and so governments have now really prioritized technology as a strategic area. So, and then you start looking like, where do those technologies come from? How do we create ChatGPT, or why the next vaccine business, or the next generation of computing, like in quantum computing? How do we ensure that Europe also produces companies like in the US, and we don't have this advantage that we have a Microsoft or a Google with deep pockets investing, way ahead of the curve into these technologies. So how do we catch up? I think that's the challenge that was there for a long time. I mean, that's why I think you started DLD, and I think a lot of people saw this, but it was not a policy priority, and it has become a policy priority. So that's a good thing. Then obviously it becomes a hype, and everybody talks about deep tech and doesn't really know what it is or how to really support it. And we also we have for years acknowledged that there is a very strong scientific base in Europe, producing some of the leading technologies, but they're not actually turned into scalable companies here, maybe small companies, and then they're acquired again by those bigger foreign companies. And we don't seem to be able to build the next generation of big tech companies. We've seen ARM, of course. There are a few examples. ARM, and we have in the Netherlands, we have this ASML, which is a really powerful company in a very important value chain. But on the whole, we're not in the same space that, for instance, maybe the Americans and the Chinese are. So what we do start at the basis. So we look at where do we have technologies that have potential and we are strong in. Like for instance, we have a cluster in Delft University of Technology around quantum computing, especially quantum networks, and we know that there's a strong potential. But then how do you get that from potential to market, and then at such a scale that these companies will be the next ones that acquire other companies and they don't get acquired themselves? And that's actually a strategy that we're now working on. But it starts with understanding, how good are you at something, and do you have the mechanisms to transfer that technology to a promising startup, and then how do you actually get it capitalized so that it become a winning company?
And what is your personal delight in doing this, what you do?
Oh, it's the best job in the world. No, I mean,
I have the best job in the world.
No, I have a better job than you in the world. So, okay, you have the best job in your world. I have the best job in my world. No, so I have a background in consulting and in government, and so I like systems change, and many of the founders, we work with don't. They just basically want to build their business and they don't want to care about the system. But we see it as a really important relationship between the two. Having more successful tech founders and tech companies that share their wealth with their employees, they will become the next generation of founders and angel investors. So really to get that flywheel going is, from a systems point of view, is really important. Because if we want these deep tech things or these really impactful technologies in the market, you need to have the rest solved as well. But you can't continue working on the system if you don't have the entrepreneurs that are building the businesses. So I'm like the interface between the two. I know what's happening on the tech side, but I can translate that to government into policy. So what kind of fiscal policy do you need? What kind of migration policy do you need? Your education policy, those kind of things. The things that most founders will find quite boring, but I find them really interesting. So that's where I can add some value.
Look at his face. He was really into it, energized by this question. Thank you. You just spoke about the Netherlands, the Dutch tech ecosystem, and you spoke a little bit about Europe. What can we do to connect the various ecosystems, the one in Italy, the one in Germany, the many in Germany, even the many in Romania? I have the feeling that we are strong in Europe, but we have no ego. We have no marketing strategy for the ecosystems here in Europe. We have to align much better. We have to get to know each other much better. Thanks for Techsylvania. This is a wonderful place to get to know you. Constantijn, what can we do to play a major role in Europe regarding tech?
Yeah, well, you see different models. I mean, if you take the French model, France was really not the place that you think the next unicorns were going to come from. And you have a president really top-down, prioritizing it, putting a lot of public money into the system, and it works. It works for a certain time, I'd say. Then you have another approach in the UK that has done an amazing job to really create the more bottom-up force of getting capital to the system. Obviously, London always was a city with a lot of capital, but they managed to connect that with Cambridge, so you get the mix of technology entrepreneurship and you get capital involved, and then a lot of network building with a lot of support from the Prime Minister at the time, and some good fiscal policies. That's a model that would work. It's more bottom-up. I love the Israeli model, but very strategic. And I think also with a very strong bottom-up approach, obviously with strong links to the US, and that's typically a market that we all need to be at least aware of and probably acting in. Because all the other models, like the Chinese model or the Singaporean model, Taiwan, require such a strategic government outlook with the ability to prioritize, that it's very un-European, I would say. I don't see that happening so much. We do need to kind of build more on a bottom-up system. I believe that there's some benefit in this kind of eagerness, FOMO, cities competing with each other, countries competing with each other, because at least it will drive the ambition up. And what I don't believe in is that tech policy is a social policy, so that we have to bring everybody on board. You have to bring those on board that want to go fast. So, for instance, if and you see that it doesn't really matter where that happens. We're seeing a lot of good stuff coming, for instance, out of Nigeria or out of Kenya. It doesn't have to be Europe. Look, if Romania wants to excel in this, you have to start thinking about what is your key strength. And I think you have amazing developers, for instance. That could be a core around which you could build a policy. And then probably those in the first stages will actually leave the country. A lot of our government's reaction is to, and also in Europe as a whole, no, we have to keep them here. You have to keep the companies here. Well, if the companies don't have the right inputs here, then they shouldn't stay here because then they can't grow. So they need to go, but make sure that they want to come back. Make sure that their experience comes back, that their investments come back, and that eventually maybe they want to build have their developers hub here and create a lot of actually economic value here locally, and then it will start going. You know, you have to take a longer term perspective. In 10, 15 years, you can make a massive change. The UK was backwards in terms of innovation output in the 90s, and they made a deliberate change. We've seen what happened in Estonia, a country under, from behind the Iron Curtain, emerging as a tech leader globally. It's not just a European phenomenon, but it's a global player. So really, if you set the right priorities, if you build on your strength, and if you retain an open attitude, then tech clusters can emerge anywhere.
Does the European Union help for this? Help our systems to connect?
The European Union can help, but for instance, a lot of the money that goes to countries like Romania is structural funds, and they're managed by local government, and then the local government has to set the priorities. The European Commission is not able to really set those priorities. So if you, for instance, prioritize broadband access, you prioritize education and innovation, that could of course be an accelerator. I think what Europe has done is through its, for instance, the European Innovation Council is now providing about 11 billion in pretty dumb capital, which is good. It's kind of non-dilutive money that can support deep tech companies in their early phases, and then there's a kind of another instrument where you can do your first round, where there's also EIB money available to grow. That will be like investments around the 15 million. So that's sizable. It's 20 million for promising companies from Europe, and they're really looking for companies all across Europe to invest that kind of money in. So I guess that's definitely something they can do. Another thing we can do is basically share best practices. One of the major barriers to technology emerging out of universities is actually the universities themselves and how they try to monetize their spin-offs by very kind of harsh IP and equity arrangements. So we had the same in the Netherlands. We saw that we had a lot of scientific output, but very low kind of innovation output. And we found that, for instance, just having a standard term sheets for all of the university that could sign up, which were founder friendly, that was already a big help. So that's something you can do. You make sure that the output of the universities is much higher. And of course, events like this, that you bring people together, grow this group, make sure that you don't just come together, have fun, but also actually really do business. And then I think it's an amazing job also from the organization to bring in people from the outside. Because you need to be linked to the kind of the hotspots, either in the US, Israel, Northern Europe, to where you want to grow your business, and make sure that they come here, that they're aware of what's happening, and build those relationships.
Constantijn, just a second. What is creativity to you?
Wow, what's creativity? Creativity is, I think...
You come from the Netherlands, from the...
Well, we just saw the generative AI and its creativity, and it kind of redefines what creativity really is. But I think for me it would be new, kind of original ideas presented also in an original way. But the creativity can be in anything, right? It can be in your way of life, in cooking, in the products that you are developing. But I think it does require a very free mindset, an open mind. I think, and I had a discussion with Chris coming here in the taxi about diversity, how important that is, that you bring diverse opinions and diverse skill sets into your team in the way you develop products. So I think that is really important. But creativity, I think is creating new things in new ways.
And how do you spark creativity?
Oh my gosh, Jesus, this is like a workshop here.
Yeah, but it's important. We need to embrace our creativity. We need to talk to artists. We have to be curious. And I think it's very important, even for the developers, even for the scientists, to look out of their windows and get new ideas from unexpected persons like artists.
Yeah, I think maybe if you call it creativity, that kind of frames it in some ways. But I think what's really important that we don't get boxed into very fixed mindsets. And on the one hand, that's good, because if you want to be a scientist, you have to work really hard on your project. And then if we ask you to become an entrepreneur, that's a very different set of challenges. So I do think there's a lot of benefit in. That's good, people need to focus, but also to create environments where you basically force interdisciplinary interaction, so that you, for instance, we used to do this. We brought like 500 people to an island, and then we try to create as much interaction as possible between entrepreneurs, investors, scientists, creatives, and activists. Because the activist might also want to change a big problem, but is acting in a really small space, and it helps for them to talk to an entrepreneur or an investor who has a much bigger outlook, or much bigger kind of visions, and also has the ability to make that operational. Whereas the activist who picks up a big global problem might help the entrepreneur think, not in their local markets, but actually think about, you can do something which actually is with more or less the same efforts, because you still have 24 hours in a day, but to have much bigger impact. And so it helps to bring in role models. It helps to bring in different kind of disciplines. For instance, we had a session last month, and we brought in the current world champion cycling. She's a Dutch woman. She's 40 years old. She started cycling when she was 23. So very unlikely career, but super disciplined, super actually focused on winning or making herself a better person, and then she discussed basically how you deal with adversity, how do you deal with challenges, and she actually fell, she broke her elbow, and then she decided to continue with the world championship with a broken elbow because she thought she could help a teammate become world champion, and by some coincidence she actually became world champion herself with a broken elbow. So it's that kind of grit that entrepreneurs basically are facing every day, especially now with the harsher financial climate, and to have somebody from a completely different discipline tell her stories was very inspirational for the entrepreneurs, because it tells something about how you can actually train yourself as a leader.
I can imagine. So we have 1 minute left. Can you please give us a short description of what you saw the last 12 hours? Well, you arrived in the afternoon, and it's in the morning, and how do you react on this Romanian system, tech system you imagined here? You saw here. How do you like the Romanian food? How do you like the Romanian hospitality?
We're deep underground, right? So we were put into a salt mine. So what we saw was, I think 200 meters underground. And, but no, what I actually see is kind of an ambition and a very kind of eagerness to be on top of tech developments. We've been discussing AI all the time. I think the friends of Google, of course, are also very well integrated into this ecosystem. But I think that's really important, that you have also some big tech players that are taking interest in your local ecosystem, invest there, grow their presence, and then you'll find that there are people coming back to join those groups, and they will eventually, spin out, do their own thing. So a lot of entrepreneurial energy, and where we in the Netherlands are a bit decadent in a sense, you really can ask yourself, why would you become an entrepreneur? Because you could also join a bank, and there's a lot of employment opportunity, and you really need to want to change something. Otherwise, there's no reason to become an entrepreneur. I think the eagerness here is in that sense much higher. So I really hope that this will grow into something which is even much bigger, and we will see Romania being one of the real developers hotspots in Europe.
Yeah, thank you, Constantijn. I couldn't agree more than on this. But I have one lesson for you for you entrepreneurs. If I would be doing this and there would be 20 empty seats in the beginning, I would, in Germany or in Israel or in the US, immediately they would be seated. Don't be so shy. Dare to sit here. Dare to know. Dare to ask questions, dare to focus on your work, but also dare to connect unexpected things. Thank you so much.
It's a big pleasure. Thank you.
And come to the Netherlands.